Western comics are dying, and at this point, it seems that all of the wounds are self-inflicted.
So I'm not very familiar with the comics industry, so you're going to have to guide me through this.
I'll do my best. And anyone out there who's unfamiliar, I'll try and fill in some of the details. So it has been recently announced that Superman is now bisexual, because that's what everybody who's interested in comic books was looking forward to.
That was the essential characteristic of Superman, wasn't it? The fact he was straight.
Exactly. Nobody reads them for the exciting fights or anything like that. So, in this Guardian article that we've got up here, you can see DC Comics reveals latest Superman as bisexual in a new issue. It must be made to point out that those of you familiar with Clark Kent as Superman, it's no longer Clark Kent, or at least in this particular issue or whatever. It's a new series called Superman, Son of Kal-El, which sounds like a replacement sort of series. So it's his son, Jonathan Kent, who is bisexual. It says here, the traditionally heterosexual superhero will embark on a same-sex relationship with a friend in a new comic. Kent, who is the son of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, started his tenure in July. I must say, I am at least glad that it isn't a reveal of Clark Kent, the original Superman, as being bisexual, because at this point I wouldn't put it past them, given that it would kind of be destroying the sanctity, that you could say, of the long-standing relationship that he's had with Lois Lane, which has kind of been just set in stone for the past 80 years or so. But for all intents and purposes, this new Jonathan Kent appears to just be him, but younger. As I said, itching for a replacement. And it says here that his new love interest is Jay Nakamura, a reporter who cares for him after he mentally and physically burns out from trying to save everyone that he can. He needs to pick up all of that emotional labor that Superman can't carry.
Right.
Yes.
Maybe a superhero?
Yeah, he is supposed to be a superhero, but apparently he just can't deal with it right now, man.
Yeah.
I would save that bus full of children, but man, I'm just so burnt out. And the writer for it, a man called, let me see here, where is it? Tom Taylor has said that I've always said everyone needs heroes, and everyone deserves to see themselves in their heroes. And I'm very grateful DC and Warner Brothers share this idea, said Taylor in a statement. Superman's symbol has always stood for hope, truth, and justice. Today, that symbol represents something more.
I mean, literally. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, Cole did a video called The Progressive Skin Suit.
It is absolutely just popping that skin suit right on.
Like all these symbols, you know how they used to stand for the thing that's the main part of the franchise? No, not anymore. They stand for my new things.
Yes. Today, more people can see themselves in the most powerful superhero in comics. I mean, the contention that I would bring up is that this is just completely rejecting universalism. Like, anybody can just pick up a Superman comic and go like, wow, and imagine yourself in that position. But no, you need to have all of the immutable characteristics of whatever character you're reading as to be able to identify with them.
Yeah.
It's completely...
I mean, if the main character isn't you, then you can't identify with the story. I mean, that's the argument fundamentally.
Yes.
Because why just stop at race? Why not stop with every other difference?
At which point, why would you even read comic books? Why not just write fan fiction about yourself, or just stare in a mirror?
I mean, that's what these people used to do before they got.
And
that
is basically what they are doing now. To be fair, but I mean, it was even the case where previously Superman had a comic book called Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And I bet they don't have anything to say about the American way nowadays.
The American race, white supremacy. So.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, this is basically just a complete publicity grab, just trying to go for virtue signaling points. I mean...
Well, I think it's also another destruction of a property.
It is absolutely a subversion, skin suits, destruction, as you say. But comic books have a long line of going for these sorts of attention-grabbing headline events, whereas back in the 80s and the 90s, and basically up until about 10 years ago, there would be a big shiny red button that says "kill major character." Like Wolverine, I think the last one it happened to in the comic books was a few years ago, back in 2013. It was like, Wolverine has died. He's alive again now because comic books, and that's just how it works. But now they've replaced that button with a shiny new red button.
Make it queer.
Yes, gay. The gay button. Yeah. I mean, they've done it to.
I just love the idea that like J.K. Rowling's got like 5 of them, just like bashing each one.
Yep. But they did it with Iceman from the X-Men comic books. They made him
Wait, he's
bisexual.
actually- Seriously?
Yes, they
I
made.
thought that was a joke from Family Guy.
No, they made Iceman bisexual. In the article here, you can see as well that I think Tim Drake, who was the latest Robin, is bisexual now, and now they're going to be passing Captain America onto the mantle onto a gay character, because why create new characters when you can just co-opt these characters?
When you could just hit the gay button.
Yes, exactly. Hit that big red gay button. It's so tempting. But this is overall, as you can probably tell from the other examples, just reflective of a wider trend in the Western comics industry of trampling all over everything that came before it. There's no true innovation in terms of new characters, apart from new characters called things like what was it? Snowflake and Safe Space that was introduced into the Marvel Universe. That's the level of creativity that we're talking currently. But on this next article, you can see here, Kelly Sue DeConnick, who was a writer for Captain Marvel. I'm not aware if she is, again, you might be able to blame her for that awful Captain Marvel film that came out a few years ago that was just feminist trash, because she was like a very overtly feminist writer of the comic book. This is the sort of attitude that they have towards the fans when she's stating here in this article, I'm sorry to break this to you, but Captain America is a social justice warrior.
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
No, individual justice warrior.
I'm pretty sure Captain America served in the army in the 1940s, fighting against those who you could potentially, from a particular side, describe as social justice warriors of their own kind.
Like, they would argue themselves along those lines. I mean, justice for my social group, not for the individual citizen. I mean, the Germans as the social group, as Hitler's socialism.
It was national.
Yes, but the Hitler socialism video that Tick did will explain, if people have got time, is that, well, that's how he viewed the group. Like, he replaced the class with the German race, and therefore social justice in his mind was justice for the German people. And, it's not justice, is it? It's social justice.
No, I mean, it also all comes back to, in the end, I believe Marx also had essays like On the Jewish Question. It all wraps right back around.
Yeah, don't want to talk about Marx and his opinions on races.
But anyway, a quote from this article says, she says, Captain America stands up for what I think we wish this country was. The ideals we've always stood for, but not always acted on. Which is just a plain assertion.
Never stood for any of this.
Captain America should stand for what I want him to stand as, not what he has historically represented.
Yes, he should not stand for being American or Americanisms.
Well, that's offensive. That's very offensive. But she also said here, DeConnick had another message for her haters. If you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. Problem solved. Excellent consumer advice right there.
Chad, yes.
Yep. And
I'm thinking of Xbox. Like, you remember when the Xbox One came out, he was like, if you don't like our product, just don't buy it. And I was like,
oh, right, fair play. And then PS4's skyrocketed. Yeah. If you skip to the next article on here, you can see here that she immediately regretted telling people not to buy her books when this interview from 2019 came out, and DeConnick and her husband, Matt Fraction, who's also a comic book writer for Marvel and independent comics, were asked, did you think comics would be this sort of phenomenon that it is currently? DeConnick answered, boy, that's hard, because from our perspective, the industry is contracted and we're very worried about comics right now. So it's always interesting to me that the outside perspective is always comics are booming. DeConnick would then lay out just how bad of a shape the comic book industry is in. I think I tend to be pretty optimistic, but in this one, I'm worried. I'm straight worried. When asked why, because stores are closing at a phenomenal rate. Independent comic sales are down, mainstream comic sales are down, except the top 3 or 5 books are up. Everything in the mid-list is way down. Do you think there could be any reason for that she's maybe not examining there?
Like, I'm writing intersectional comics, no one's buying them.
I'm writing something that people just don't want to buy, maybe. And in doing so, she is actively hurting the industry and actively hurting the independent businesses. Like she said, comic book stores are closing quite frequently. And it's not because the comic book stores themselves are really doing anything wrong. It's what they're putting on their shelves. And just to show as well how much they are being absolutely demolished at the moment, manga, if you skip to the next one, a single manga, Demon Slayer, which I believe is very popular at the moment because of the Netflix series. Earlier on this year, Demon Slayer had sold 100 million copies, while American comic books altogether had only sold 15 million units. So we're talking orders of magnitude where one single manga, one single comic can outstrip the entire American industry. And this article points out that keep in mind that they are also counting manga that is being sold in America. So in that 15 million is probably a few million Demon Slayer right there. So we are just, Western comics are just getting absolutely destroyed at the moment, which for anybody out there who might have enjoyed them in the past or, you know, because of the big boom that is going on at the moment with the comic movies industry, might be interested. Just it's quite sad to see. But just read manga. It's a lot better.
Oh, God.
I mean,
there's going to be some video commenters who agree with you, and I don't want to listen to it.
No. It is better. I don't read much of it myself, but I do think it does tap into something that most American and Western comic books don't anymore, which is that sense of it doesn't pander to the intersectionalists.
Right.
And it also, they have women who are still sexy, men who are still manly. It's all ridiculous and Japanese, of course, but it is trying to tell interesting stories rather than just push narratives.
As if He-Man was very realistic.
Exactly. Exactly. But as a result of all of the issues that have been going on with the Western comics world, it did a few years ago spark a movement called Comicsgate, where professional comic artists and writers left the mainstream companies, mainly DC and Marvel, and started their own independent titles, which they used Indiegogo and Kickstarter and other such places to fund. And as you can imagine from these types of people who are infesting the industry, the mainstream professional industry was not particularly pleased with this development, and they pretty much love that the industry is wrapped around their little finger and they can just do whatever they want, and they want to keep it that way. And everyone knows if you've got a monopoly, you don't want any sort of competition. And if you skip to this next article here, so one of the particular people who has attached themselves to Comicsgate, John, he's Hispanic, so apologies if I mispronounce his name. John De La Rosa was banned a few years ago from Worldcon Science Fiction Convention as a result of his political beliefs, because they are just trying to actively push out people from that sector. So he's a comics writer and sci-fi author, and Worldcon is a sci-fi convention held by the San Francisco Science Fiction Conventions Company. So being held in San Francisco, you can imagine the sort of people it attracts. And the article says that in August 2017, De La Rosa was in talks with the convention chair, Kevin Roche, about renting a table to sell his books at the event. Roche did not mention any concern at the time about De La Rosa, and he didn't seem hesitant to take his money. But by November, De La Rosa had noted to Roche that he'd been receiving lots of threats over his political beliefs and his outspoken nature on Twitter, and had been receiving targeted harassment against his family in his home, including receiving a spring-loaded package of glitter shaped like penises, which is very childish. But in that split second when a spring-loaded package is going off in your children's face, it's not going to feel like a funny joke, is it? And when he was told about all this, the organizer, the chairhead, Roche, air silence, didn't respond to him. So De La Rosa stated that what he was going to do to try and secure his safety, because he'd asked them, you know, will I be able to get an escort or anything like that? Will there be adequate security on the premises? They stated, and he didn't get a response. He said that he was going to be going to Worldcon with a body cam, and when he told this to Worldcon, they just banned him from the event. But in doing so, they released a statement on Facebook which stated that they didn't want to have him on because he had violated their rules, and they didn't want to encourage racist and bullying behavior at Worldcon. Do you notice anything in his behavior that may not line up with what they've stated there?
Sorry, wearing cameras is racist and bullying now?
Apparently so.
Right.
So he decided to actually try and give it a go at saying, well, I'm not racist, this is defamation. putting it out there publicly, given that he's a sci-fi author who tries.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you know.
See the bastards.
But the reason that they did this, from what I can see, if you skip to this next article I've got here, this guy Jim Hines, who appears to be very much in the anti-De Rose camp right here, basically points out a number of times that he has been trolling and harassing people, which basically means that he just trolls leftists. Essentially, when a sci-fi author called John Scalzi posted a tweet about both sides of the political spectrum not being equally bad, and if you think that, you're an effing idiot, of course, pointing to, like, well, all those right-wingers, they're all evil. De La Rose basically gave a based no you and said, you're right. You're right. They're not both equally bad because your side and your cohorts defend pedophiles and destroy anything precious in Western civilization.
Very based. Very based.
Immensely based. And it's not like...
I mean, just add on the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and CCP are also your fault, but...
Exactly. And even within sci-fi fiction itself, this can be backed up quite easily by the fact that there was a legendary, I should say, feminist sci-fi author called Marion Zimmer Bradley, who after she died, her children came out and were like, yeah, she molested us, which is pretty awful. And she was a legend in the industry. So... Of course, you had people celebrating this. If you go to the next one, you can see Book Riot, a leftist publication, saying that this hasn't really upset anyone who's tired of the continued attempts to make the Hugos, being the science fiction award ceremony, and other parts of the science fiction literary fandom, a front for the right-wing culture wars.
No, we wanted to be a front for left-wing culture wars.
Exactly. What do you mean you're pushing back against our agendas? This is unfair.
I mean, I agree that you should be able to just not have to deal with this if you can, but I referenced Chris Ray Gun's video, We Didn't Start the Fire.
Exactly.
No, it's you guys who turn up and insist this isn't intersectional enough, and then guess what? There's pushback.
I mean, not to invoke its dreaded name, but Gamergate was the big start of all of that sort of thing, where people noticed, oh, hey, there's lots of weirdos infiltrating our safe spaces. You could almost say our nerd spaces.
Non-political spaces.
Yeah, non-political spaces. Let's push them back, and they all just started reeing at them. And yeah. So the complaint that De La Rose filed was against the parent company. If you go to the next one, file 770, they have an article sort of explaining a bit of it, where it's against the San Francisco Science Fiction Conventions Company. There were five causes of complaint. I don't know how American law system works, but they were violation of the Unruh Act, which is discrimination against personal characteristics, because he liked to throw in the, like, why are you complaining about me? I'm Hispanic, you racist, bro. Violation of Civil Code Section 51.5, which is discrimination against political affiliation because he's conservative, and then putting a few others, and then primarily defamation. And in 2019, 4 of the 5 causes were thrown out, and the case was allowed to continue on the charge of defamation, which a lot of people at the time were like, he's going to lose because we've thrown out a bunch of them. But I think in a case like this, it is just a situation where they're just trying to put as many forward as possible.
Case?
Yeah, exactly. Put a bunch forward, and whichever's just the strongest will hopefully rise to the top. And if you skip to this next one, he won earlier this year.
Absolute Chad.
Absolutely. In June earlier this year, after a settlement agreement, the case is now over, and Worldcon were forced to post a public apology to their Facebook page and their website, and along with this, they were forced to pay $4,000 to De La Rose as reparations for potential damages done to his reputation.
I love it's the word reparations.
Yep. Well, I mean, he's a part of a minority. He's marginalized. The article here notes that left out of the settlement was De La Rose's generous offer to add himself as the diversity and inclusion officer to the organization for future conventions and events to ensure discrimination based on identity does not occur again. Which is excellent.
What a bad
excellent,
lad.
excellent trolling. I do love it. And I've listened to a few podcasts and other such things that he's appeared on, because he's spoken about what went down in the deposition, where this guy, the person representing the San Francisco Science Fiction Convention, who we can assume is Kevin Roche, the guy who he was speaking to, who was organizing the whole thing, was an incredibly pale white man with a bright pink mohawk, who is described as British pale, which I'll forgive him for. It's true, though.
Should I be insulted or not? I don't know.
But yeah, the guy comes across as very petty by the sounds of it, because in the deposition, when the lawyers were asking him questions, he just started to go off on big intersectional rants about what white supremacy is. I can only imagine being the judge in that situation, listening to this bright pink mohawk guy just going off on one. But yeah, he says that seeing as De La Rosa himself is Hispanic, his lawyer spoke to the guy and was like, well, you do understand that, right? Yes. Does that mean he's marginalized? Yes. But he still has white privilege because, of course, he is white passing.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Although that doesn't matter either. Because I remember the CNN article on Larry Elder. I mean, Larry Elder is a white supremacist as well. He's
the black face of white supremacy, don't you know?
Oh, sorry, that was the Los Angeles Times. But CNN also argued, in a world where there are no white people in America, there is still white supremacy. By the Hispanics.
This is all the sort of Foucaultian, like, intersectional power grid where you can have marginalization of particular communities without anyone individually having those sorts of opinions.
But also that he's not white until he's an enemy, therefore he's white.
Exactly. But then, as part of the deposition, they just said to him, like, had he posted anything on his blog other than Donald Trump quotes and support for his conservative viewpoint that would make you believe that he is racist in any way. And he took a moment to think, and he just said, no. So, congratulations, you've just lost the case. And after that, it was they went for the settlement. And just to put the pin on how out of money and failing and struggling these sorts of conventions and fandoms and other such things are. So this is a big organization, you would assume, being able to hold conventions. But he said, first they asked for $100,000 for the defamation. No, we don't have that much. Okay. $50,000 for what you've said about me. No, we don't have that much either. Okay, $25,000. No, don't have that either. So fine. $4,000 and the apology, and I'll settle it. So these people are just broke. These people are broke, and the comics industry is not helping with that. So sadly, you can fight back against these people defaming you, but the comics industry as it stands in the West and the sci-fi industry is infected.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can catch the full podcast at 1 p.m. every weekday UK time at lotuseaters.com. You can also sign up at lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site.
Yeah, that's how we keep this whole operation running. And recently we've put up loads of great stuff, such as this interview with legendary comedian Steve Hughes, one of my personal favourite comedians, so it was a real honour to be able to meet him. But one thing that I didn't expect, that he would be such a deep thinker, and this podcast is genuinely like a meeting of minds in a way. He was right on my wavelength on a bunch of things and helped me actually connect a bunch of dots, but I'm not going to carry on and spoil it. We also, of course, have lots of interesting articles that have been written, such as this one by Josh about the dumbest country on earth. And for for silver tier subscribers, we also include a link, so it's we have an audio reading of it from a chap called Jonathan, who has a very smooth voice that you will enjoy. And this is great because often I don't have time to read all of the articles we put up, because we've put up a lot of regular content, and so this saves me the hassle of having to read it myself. So I really actually am very appreciative of this feature on a personal level. But we also do the Contemplations and Epochs, which are just interesting podcasts about interesting things. These are regular weekly podcasts. So this one is one of our writers, Josh, he's got a master's degree in psychology, talking about theories of intelligence and how they matter. And of course, we've got the Epochs, where myself and Bo, or in this case it was Josh and Bo, talking about the life of Sir Francis Drake. So that's 2 solid hours talking about England's most notorious adventurer. But we've also got lots and lots of other ones. This is number 21, so there's a good back catalogue there. And finally, we have our book clubs, and this is the part that I'm most proud of. Recently, we've done Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell, and
Reflections on a Ravaged Century by Robert Conquest.
Yeah, Robert Conquest is fantastic. Just if you want Western chauvinist historian, he's your man.
Anti-socialism.
Yes, in all forms, it's fantastic. And like I said, that's what keeps the podcast running. So if you want to become a member, thank you very much, and we think there's some great stuff you'll enjoy.